Water is life. This simple truth resonates deeply across cultures and throughout history. In arid regions, this reality is even more profound. Rain, a gift from the heavens, holds the power to sustain life, nourish crops, and quench the thirst of the land. For the people of Arabia, where scorching sun and vast deserts dominate the landscape, rain has always been a blessing of immense value. In the Islamic tradition, rain is recognized as a sign of God's mercy and compassion. It is a tangible manifestation of divine providence, a reminder of the delicate balance that sustains life on earth. The Quran, the holy book of Islam, speaks of rain in numerous verses, emphasizing its importance and the divine power behind it. The Istisqa prayer. In times of drought and hardship, when the heavens seemed closed and the earth parched, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, would turn to God in supplication, seeking his mercy in the form of rain. This special prayer for rain, known as Istisqa, is a beautiful example of the Islamic tradition of seeking divine intervention in times of need. It is a collective act of humility, acknowledging human dependence on a higher power. The Istisqa prayer is not merely a plea for rain, it is a spiritual practice that encourages introspection, repentance, and a deepening of faith. It is a reminder that true sustenance comes not just from physical nourishment, but also from spiritual connection with the Creator. Volume 2, Book 17, number 119, narrated by Abbas bin Tamim's uncle, the Prophet, p.b.u.h, went out to offer the Istisqa prayer and turned and put on his cloak inside out. Volume 2, Book 17, number 120, narrated by Abu Huraira. Whenever the Prophet, p.b.u., lifted his head from the bowing in the last rak'ah, he used to say, "O Allah, save Ayyash bin Abi Rabia. O Allah, save Salama bin Hisham. O Allah, save Walid bin Walid. O Allah, save the weak faithful believers. O Allah, be hard on the tribes of Mudar and send famine years on them, like the famine years of Prophet Joseph." The Prophet further said, "Allah, forgive the tribes of Gifa and save the tribes of Islam." Abu az-Zinad, a sub-narrator, said, "The Qunut used to be recited by the Prophet in the Fajr prayer." Volume 2, Book 17, number 121, narrated by Masruq. We were with Abdullah, and he said, when the Prophet saw the refusal of the people to accept Islam, he said, "O Allah, send famine years on them for 7 years, like the 7 years of famine during the time of Prophet Joseph." So famine overtook them for 1 year and destroyed every kind of life, to such an extent that the people started eating hides, carcasses, and rotten dead animals. Whenever one of them looked towards the sky, he would, imagine himself to, see smoke because of hunger. So Abu Sufyan went to the Prophet and said, "O Muhammad, you order people to obey Allah and to keep good relations with kith and kin. No doubt the people of your tribe are dying, so please pray to Allah for them." So Allah revealed, "Then watch you for the day that the sky will bring forth a kind of smoke plainly visible. Verily you will return to disbelief. On the day when we shall seize you with a mighty grasp." 44.10-16. Ibn Masud added, "Al-Batsha, that is grasp, happened in the Battle of Badr, and no doubt smoke, Al-Batsha, Al-Lizam, and the verse of Surat Ar-Rum have all passed." Volume 2, Book 17, number 122, narrated by Abdullah bin Dinar. My father said, "I heard Ibn Umar reciting the poetic verses of Abu Talib, and a white person, that is the Prophet, who is requested to pray for rain and who takes care of the orphans and is the guardian of widows." Salim's father, Ibn Umar, said, "The following poetic verse occurred to my mind while I was looking at the face of the Prophet, p.b.u.h, while he was praying for rain. He did not get down till the rainwater flowed profusely from every rufji utter, and a white person who is requested to pray for rain and who takes care of the orphans and is the guardian of widows." And these were the words of Abu Talib. Volume 2, Book 17, number 123, narrated by Anas. Whenever drought threatened them, Umar bin al-Khattab used to ask Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib to invoke Allah for rain. He used to say, "O Allah, we used to ask our Prophet to invoke you for rain, and you would bless us with rain, and now we ask his uncle to invoke you for rain. O Allah, bless us with rain." 1. And so it would rain. Volume 2, Book 17, number 124, narrated by Abdullah bin Zaid. The Prophet turned his cloak inside out on Istisqa. Volume 2, Book 17, number 125, narrated by Abdullah bin Zaid. The Prophet went towards the Musalla and invoked Allah for rain. He faced the Qibla and wore his cloak inside out and offered 2 rakat. Volume 2, Book 17, number 126, narrated by Sharik bin Abdullah bin Abi Namir. I heard Anas bin Malik saying, on a Friday a person entered the main mosque through the gate facing the pulpit while Allah's apostle was delivering the khutbah. The man stood in front of Allah's apostle and said, "O Allah's apostle, the livestock are dying and the roads are cut off, so please pray to Allah for rain." Anas added, Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, raised both his hands and said, "O Allah, bless us with rain. O Allah, bless us with rain. O Allah, bless us with rain." Anas added, "By Allah, we could not see any trace of cloud in the sky, and there was no building or a house between us and the mountains of Sila." Anas added, "A heavy cloud like a shield appeared from behind it, that is Sila mountain. When it came in the middle of the sky, it spread and then rained." Anas further said, "By Allah, we could not see the sun for a week." Next Friday, a person entered through the same gate, and at that time, Allah's apostle was delivering the Friday's khutbah. The man stood in front of him and said, "O Allah's apostle, the livestock are dying and the roads are cut off. Please pray to Allah to withhold rain." Anas added, Allah's apostle, I raised both his hands and said, "O Allah, round about us and not on us. O Allah, on the plateaus, on the mountains, on the hills, in the valleys, and on the places where trees grow." So the rain stopped and we came out walking in the sun. Sharik asked Anas whether it was the same person who had asked for the rain the last Friday. Anas replied that he did not know. Volume 2, Book 17, number 127, narrated by Sharik Anas bin Malik, said, a person entered the mosque on a Friday, through the gate facing the Dar al-Qada, and Allah's apostle was standing delivering the khutbah, sermon. The man stood in front of Allah's apostle and said, "O Allah's apostle, livestock are dying and the roads are cut off. Please pray to Allah for rain." So Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, raised both his hands and said, "O Allah, bless us with rain. O Allah, bless us with rain. O Allah, bless us with rain." Anas added, "By Allah, there were no clouds in the sky, and there was no house or building between us and the mountain of Silas. Then a big cloud like a shield appeared from behind it, that Silas mountain, and when it came in the middle of the sky, it spread and then rained. By Allah, we could not see the sun for a week. The next Friday a person entered through the same gate, and Allah's apostle was delivering the Friday khutbah, and the man stood in front of him and said, "O Allah's apostle, the livestock are dying and the roads are cut off. Please pray to Allah to withhold rain." Anas added, Allah's apostle raised both his hands and said, "O Allah, round about us and not on us, O Allah, on the plateaus, on the mountains, on the hills, in the valleys, and on the places where trees grow." Anas added, the rain stopped and we came out walking in the sun. Sharik asked Anas whether it was the same person who had asked for rain the previous Friday. Anas replied that he did not know. Volume 2, Book 17, number 128, narrated by Qatada Anas. I said, while Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, was delivering the Friday khutbah, sermon, a man came and said, "O Allah's apostle, rain is scarce. Please ask Allah to bless us with rain." So he invoked Allah for it, and it rained so much that we could hardly reach our homes, and it continued raining till the next Friday. Anas further said, then the same or some other person stood up and said, "O Allah's apostle, invoke Allah to withhold the rain." On that, Allah's apostle, I said, "O Allah, round about us and not on us." Anas added, I saw the clouds dispersing right and left, and it continued to rain, but not over Medina. Volume 2, Book 17, number 129, narrated by Anas. A man came to the Prophet, p.b.u.h, and said, livestock are destroyed and the roads are cut off. So Allah's apostle invoked Allah for rain, and it rained from that Friday till the next Friday. The same person came again and said, houses have collapsed, roads are cut off, and the livestock are destroyed. Please pray to Allah to withhold the rain. Allah's apostle stood up and said, "O Allah, let it rain on the plateaus, on the hills, in the valleys, and over the places where trees grow." So the clouds cleared away from Medina as clothes are taken off. Volume 2, Book 17, number 130, narrated by Anas bin Malik. A man came to Allah's apostle and said, "O Allah's apostle, livestock are destroyed and the roads are cut off, so please invoke Allah." So Allah's apostle prayed, and it rained. from that Friday to the next Friday. Then he came to Allah's apostle Dan and said, "O Allah's apostle, houses have collapsed, roads are cut off, and the livestock are destroyed." So Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, prayed, "O Allah, let it rain on the tops of mountains, on the plateaus, in the valleys, and over the places where trees grow." So the clouds cleared away from Medina as clothes are taken off. Volume 2, Book 17, number 131. Narrated by Anas bin Malik. IP man complained to the Prophet about the destruction of livestock and property and the hunger of the offspring. So he invoked Allah for rain. The narrator, Anas, did not mention that the Prophet had worn his cloak inside out or faced the Qibla. Volume 2, Book 17, number 132, narrated by Anas bin Malik. A man came to Allah's apostle and said, "O Allah's apostle, livestock are destroyed and the roads are cut off, so please invoke Allah." So Allah's apostle prayed for rain, and it rained from that Friday till the next Friday. Then a man came to the Prophet, p.b.u.h, and said, "O Allah's apostle, the houses have collapsed, roads are cut off, and the livestock are destroyed." So Allah's apostle said, "O Allah, let it rain, on the tops of the mountains, on the plateaus, in the valleys, and over the places where trees grow, to ye." So the clouds cleared away from Medina as clothes are taken off. Volume 2, Book 17, number 133, narrated by Masruq. One day I went to Ibn Masud, who said, "When Quraysh delayed in embracing Islam, the Prophet I invoked Allah to curse them, so they were afflicted with a famine year, because of which many of them died, and they ate the carcasses. And Abu Sufyan came to the Prophet and said, 'O Muhammad, you came to order people to keep good relation with kith and kin, and your nation is being destroyed, so invoke Allah one.' So the Prophet I recited the holy verses of Sirat ad-Dukhan, then watch you for the day that the sky will bring forth a kind of smoke plainly visible." 44.10. When the famine was taken off, the people renegade once again as non-believers. The statement of Allah in Surah ad-Dukhan, -44, refers to that, "On the day when we shall seize you with a mighty grasp," 44.16, and that was what happened on the day of the Battle of Badr. Asbath added on the authority of Mansur, Allah's apostle prayed for them, and it rained heavily for 7 days. So the people complained of the excessive rain. The Prophet said, "O Allah, let it rain around us and not on us." So the clouds dispersed over his head, and it rained over the surroundings. Volume 2, Book 17, number 134. Narrated by Anas, Allah's apostle. I was delivering the khutbah sermon on a Friday when the people stood up, shouted, and said, "O Allah's apostle, there is no rain, drought. The trees have dried and the livestock are destroyed. Please pray to Allah for rain." So Allah's apostle said twice, "O Allah, bless us with rain." By Allah, there was no trace of cloud in the sky, and suddenly the sky became overcast with clouds, and it started raining. The Prophet came down the pulpit and offered the prayer. When he came back from the prayer to his house, it was raining, and it rained continuously till the next Friday. When the Prophet started delivering the Friday khutbah sermon, the people started shouting and said to him, "The houses have collapsed and the roads are cut off, so please pray to Allah to withhold the rain." So the Prophet smiled and said, "O Allah, round about us and not on us." So the sky became clear over Medina, but it kept on raining over the outskirts of Medina, and not a single drop of rain fell over Midian. I looked towards the sky, which was as bright and clear as a crown. Volume 2, Book 17, number 135, narrated by Abbas bin Tamim. That his uncle, who was one of the companions of the Prophet, had told him, "The Prophet went out with the people to invoke Allah for rain for them. He stood up and invoked Allah for rain, then faced the Qibla and turned his cloak inside out, and it rained." Volume 2, Book 17, number 136, narrated by Abbas bin Tamim from his uncle, who said, "The Prophet went out to invoke Allah for rain. He faced the Qibla invoking Allah. He turned over his cloak inside out and then offered 2 rakat and recited the Quran aloud in them." Volume 2, Book 17, number 137, narrated by Abbas bin Tamim from his uncle. I saw the Prophet on the day when he went out to offer the Istisqa prayer. He turned his back towards the people and faced the Qibla and asked Allah for rain. Then he turned his cloak inside out and led us in a 2 rakat prayer and recited the Quran aloud in them. Volume 2, Book 17, number 138, narrated by Abbas bin Tamlum from his uncle, who said, "The Prophet invoked Allah for rain and offered a 2 rakat prayer, and he put his cloak inside out." Volume 2, Book 17, number 139, narrated by Abbas bin Tamim from his uncle, who said, "The Prophet invoked Allah for rain and offered a 2 rakat prayer, and he put his cloak inside out." Volume 2, Book 17, number 140, narrated by Abdullah bin Zayd al-Ansari. The Prophet went out to the Musalla to offer the Istisqa prayer, faced the Qibla, and offered a 2 rakat prayer and turned his cloak inside out. Narrated Abu Bakr. The Prophet put the right side of his cloak on his left side. Volume 2, Book 17, number 141. Narrated by Anas bin Malik. The Prophet never raised his hands for any invocation except for that of Istisqa, and he used to raise them so much that the whiteness of his armpits became visible. Note, it may be that Anas did not see the Prophet raising his hands, but it is narrated that the Prophet used to raise his hands for invocations other than Istisqa. See Hadith number 807 and 808, and also see Hadith numbered 612, Volume 5. Volume 2, Book 17, number 142, narrated by Aisha. Whenever Allah's apostle saw the rain, he used to say, "O Allah, let it be a strong, fruitful rain." Volume 2, Book 17, number 143, narrated by Anas bin Malik. In the lifetime of Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, the people were afflicted with a famine year. While the Prophet was delivering the khutbah, sermon on the pulpit on a Friday, a Bedouin stood up and said, "O Allah's apostle, the livestock are dying and the family's offspring are hungry. Please pray to Allah to bless us with rain." Allah's apostle raised both his hands towards the sky, and at that time there was not a trace of cloud in the sky. Then the clouds started gathering like mountains. Before he got down from the pulpit, I saw rainwater trickling down his beard. It rained that day, the next day, the third day, the fourth day, until the next Friday, when the same Bedouin or some other person stood up during the Friday khutbah and said, "O Allah's apostle, the houses have collapsed and the livestock are drowned. Please invoke Allah for us." So Allah's apostle raised both his hands and said, "O Allah, around us and not on us." Whichever side the Prophet directed his hand, the clouds dispersed from there till a hole in the clouds was formed over Medina. The valley of Qarnat remained flowing with water for 1 month, and none came from outside who didn't talk about the abundant rain. Volume 2, Book 17, number 144, narrated by Anas. Whenever a strong wind blew, anxiety appeared on the face of the Prophet, fearing that wind might be a sign of Allah's wrath. Volume 2, Book 17, number 145, narrated by Ibn Abbas. The Prophet said, "I was granted victory with As-Saba, and the nation of Ad was destroyed by Ad-Dabur, westerly wind." Volume 2, Book 17, number 146, narrated by Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "The hour, last day, will not be established until religious knowledge will be taken away by the death of religious learned men. Earthquakes will be very frequent, time will pass quickly, afflictions will appear, murders will increase, and money will overflow amongst you." See Hadith number 85, Vol 1. Volume 2, Book 17, number 147, narrated by Ibn Umar. The Prophet said, "O Allah, bless our Sham and our Yemen." People said, "Our Nard" as well. The Prophet again said, "O Allah, bless our Sham and Yemen." They said again, "Our Nard" as well. On that the Prophet said, "There will appear earthquakes and afflictions, and from there will come out the side of the head of Satan." Volume 2, Book 17, number 148, narrated by Zayd bin Khalid al-Juhani. Allah's apostle led the morning prayer in Al-Hudaybiyah, and it had rained the previous night. When the Prophet, p.b.u.h, had finished the prayer, he faced the people and said, "Do you know what your Lord has said?" They replied, "Allah and his apostle know better." The Prophet said, "Allah says, in this morning some of my worshippers remained as true believers, and some became non-believers. He who said that it had rained with the blessing and mercy of Allah is the one who believes in me and does not believe in star, but he who said it had rained because of such and such star is a disbeliever in me and is a believer in star." Volume 2, Book 17, number 149, narrated by Ibn Umar, Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, said, Keys of the unseen knowledge are 5 which nobody knows but Allah. Nobody knows what will happen tomorrow. Nobody knows what is in the womb. Nobody knows what he will gain tomorrow. Nobody knows at what place he will die. And nobody knows when it will rain. Eclipse Volume 2, Book 18, number 150, narrated by Abu Bakr. We were with Allah's apostle when the sun eclipsed. Allah's apostle stood up dragging his cloak till he entered the mosque. He led us in a 2-rakat prayer till the sun eclipse had cleared. Then the Prophet, p.b.u.h, said, "The sun and the moon do not eclipse because of someone's death. So, whenever you see these eclipses, pray and invoke Allah till the eclipse is over." Volume 2, Book 18, number 151, narrated by Abu Masud. The Prophet said, "The sun and the moon do not eclipse because of the death of someone from the people, but they are 2 signs amongst the signs of Allah. When you see them, stand up and pray." Volume 2, Book 18, number 152, narrated by Ibn Umar. The Prophet said, "The sun and the moon do not eclipse because of the death or life, that is, birth, of someone, but they are 2 signs amongst the signs of Allah. When you see them, offer the prayer." Volume 2, Book 18, number 153, narrated by Al-Mughira bin Shuba. The sun eclipsed in the lifetime of Allah's apostle on the day when his son Ibrahim died. So the people said that the sun had eclipsed because of the death of Ibrahim. Allah's apostle said, "The sun and the moon do not eclipse because of the death or life, that is, birth, of someone. When you see the eclipse, pray and invoke Allah." Volume 2, Book 18, number 154, narrated by Aisha. In the lifetime of Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, the sun eclipsed. So he led the people in prayer, and stood up and performed a long qiyam, then bowed for a long while. He stood up again and performed a long qiyam, but this time the period of standing was shorter than the first. He bowed again for a long time, but shorter than the first one. Then he prostrated and prolonged the prostration. He did the same in the second rakah as he did in the first, and then finished the prayer. By then the sun, eclipse, had cleared. He delivered the khutbah, sermon, and after praising and glorifying Allah, he said, "The sun and the moon are 2 signs against the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse on the death or life of anyone. So when you see the eclipse, remember Allah and say, Takbir, pray and give sadaqah." The Prophet then said, "O followers of Muhammad, by Allah, there is none who has more gaira self-respect than Allah, as he has forbidden that his slaves, male or female, commit adultery, illegal sexual intercourse. O followers of Muhammad, by Allah, if you knew that which I know, you would laugh little and weep much." Volume 2, Book 18, number 155, narrated by Abdullah bin Amr. When the sun eclipsed in the lifetime of Allah's apostle, an announcement was made that a prayer was to be offered in congregation. Volume 2, Book 18, number 156, narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, p.b.u.h. In the lifetime of the Prophet, the sun eclipsed, and he went to the mosque, and the people aligned behind him. He said the takbir, starting the prayer, and prolonged the recitation from the Quran, and then said takbir and performed a prolonged bowing. Then he lifted his head and said, "Sami Allahu liman hamida." Allah heard him who sent his praises to him. He then did not prostrate, but stood up and recited a prolonged recitation, which was shorter than the first recitation. He again said takbir, and then bowed a prolonged bowing, but shorter than the first one, and then said, "Sami Allahu liman hamida rabbana walaklamd." Allah heard him who sent his praises to him. "O our sustainer, all the praises are for you," and then prostrated and did the same in the second rakah. Thus he completed 4 bowing and 4 prostrations. The sun, eclipse, had cleared before he finished the prayer. After the prayer, he stood up, glorified and praised Allah as he deserved, and then said, "The sun and the moon are 2 of the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse because of the death or the life, that is, birth of someone. When you see them, make haste for the prayer." Narrated Az-Zuri. I said to Ursa, "When the sun eclipsed at Medina, your brother Abdullah bin Az-Zubair offered only a 2-rakat prayer like that of the morning Fajr prayer." Ursa replied, "Yes, for he missed the Prophet's tradition concerning this matter." Volume 2, Book 18, number 157, narrated by Aisha, the wife of the Prophet. On the day when the sun Kasafat eclipsed, Allah's apostle prayed. He stood up and said takbir and recited a prolonged recitation. Then he performed a prolonged bowing. Then he raised his head and said, Sami'a lahu liman hamida, and then remained standing and recited a prolonged recitation which was shorter than the first. Then he performed a prolonged bowing which was shorter than the first. Then he prostrated and prolonged the prostration, and he did the same in the second rakah as in the first, and then finished the prayer with taslim. By that time the sun, Eclipse, had cleared. He addressed the people and said, The sun and the moon are two of the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse, Yaksifan, because of the death or the life, that is birth, of someone. So when you see them, make haste for the prayer. Volume 2, Book 18, number 158, narrated by Abu Bakr. Allah's Apostle said, The sun and the moon are two signs amongst the signs of Allah, and they do not eclipse because of the death of someone, but Allah frightens His devotees with them. Volume 2, Book 18, number 159, narrated by Amra bint Abdurrahman a-Jewess, came to ask Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, about something. She said to her, May Allah give you refuge from the punishment of the grave. So Aisha asked Allah's Apostle, Would the people be punished in their graves? Allah's Apostle, after seeking refuge with Allah from the punishment of the grave, and thus replied in the affirmative. Then one day Allah's Apostle rode to go to some place, but the sun eclipsed. He returned in the forenoon and passed through the rear of the dwellings of his wives and stood for the eclipse prayer, and the people stood behind him. He stood up for a long period and then performed a prolonged bowing, which was shorter than the first bowing. Then he raised his head and prostrated. Then he stood up for the second rakah for a long while, but the standing was shorter than that of the first rakah. Then he performed a prolonged bowing, which was shorter than the first one. Then he raised his head and prostrated. Then he stood up for a long time, but shorter than the first. Then he performed a prolonged bowing, but shorter than the first. Then he raised his head and prostrated and finished the prayer, and then delivered the sermon and said as much as Allah wished. And then he ordered the people to seek refuge with Allah from the punishment of the grave. Volume 2, Book 18, number 160. Narrated by Abdullah bin Amr, when the sun eclipsed in the lifetime of Allah's Apostle, and an announcement was made that the prayer was to be held in congregation. The Prophet performed 2 bowing in 1 rakah. Then he stood up and performed 2 bowing in 1 rakah. Then he sat down and finished the prayer, and by then the eclipse had cleared. Aisha said, I'd never performed such a long prostration. Volume 2, Book 18, number 161, narrated by Abdullah bin Abbas. The sun eclipsed in the lifetime of the Prophet p.b.u.h. Allah's Apostle offered the eclipse prayer and stood for a long period equal to the period in which one could recite Surat al-Baqarah. Then he bowed for a long time and then stood up for a long period which was shorter than that of the first standing. Then bowed again for a long time, but for a shorter period than the first. Then he prostrated twice and then stood up for a long period, which was shorter than that of the first standing. Then he bowed for a long time, which was shorter than the previous one, and then he raised his head and stood up for a long period, which was shorter than the first standing. Then he bowed for a long time, which was shorter than the first bowing, and then prostrated twice and finished the prayer. By then the sun, Eclipse, had cleared. The Prophet then said, The sun and the moon are 2 of the signs of Allah. They eclipse neither because of the death of somebody nor because of his life, that is birth. So when you see them, remember Allah. The people say, O Allah's Apostle, we saw you taking something from your place, and then we saw you retreating. The Prophet replied, I saw paradise and stretched my hands towards a bunch of its fruits, and had I taken it, you would have eaten from it as long as the world remains. I also saw the hellfire, and I had never seen such a horrible sight. I saw that most of the inhabitants were women. The people asked, O Allah's Apostle, why is it so? The Prophet replied, Because of their ungratefulness. It was asked whether they are ungrateful to Allah. The Prophet said, They are ungrateful to their companions of life, husbands, and ungrateful to good deeds. If you are benevolent to one of them throughout the life, and if she sees anything undesirable in you, she will say, I've never had any good from you. Volume 2, Book 18, number 162, narrated by Fatima bint al-Mundhir. Asma bint al-Bakr said, I came to Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, p.b.u.h, during the solar eclipse. The people were standing and offering the prayer, and she was also praying too. I asked her, "What has happened to the people?" She pointed out with her hand towards the sky and said, "Subhanallah." I said, "Is there a sign?" She pointed out in the affirmative. Asma further said, "I too then stood up for the prayer till I fainted and then poured water on my head. When Allah's apostle had finished his prayer, he thanked and praised Allah and said, 'I have seen at this place of mine what I have never seen, even paradise and hell. No doubt it has been inspired to me that you will be put to trial in the graves like or nearly like the trial of Masih ad-Dajjal. I do not know which one of the two," Asma said. "The angels will come to every one of you and will ask, 'What do you know about this man?' That is Muhammad. The believer or a firm believer, I do not know which word Asma said, will reply, 'He is Muhammad, Allah's apostle, p.b.u.h, who came to us with clear evidences and guidance. So we accepted his teachings, believed and followed him.' The angels will then say to him, 'Sleep peacefully, as we knew surely that you were a firm believer.' The hypocrite or doubtful person, I do not know which word Asma said, will say, 'I do not know, I heard the people saying something, so I said it the same.' Volume 2, Book 18, number 163, narrated by Asma. No doubt the Prophet ordered people to manumit slaves during the solar eclipse. Volume 2, Book 18, number 164. Narrated by Amra bint Abdurrahman. A Jewess came to Aisha to ask her about something, and then she said, "May Allah give you refuge from the punishment of the grave." So Aisha asked Allah's apostle, would the people be punished in their graves? Allah's apostle asked Allah's refuge from the punishment of the grave, indicating an affirmative reply. Then one day Allah's apostle rode to leave for some place, but the sun eclipsed. He returned on the forenoon and passed through the rear of the dwellings of his wives and stood up and started offering the eclipse prayer, and the people stood behind him. He stood for a long period and then performed a long bowing, and then stood straight for a long period which was shorter than that of the first standing. Then he performed a prolonged bowing which was shorter than the first bowing. Then he raised his head and prostrated for a long time, and then stood up for the second rak'ah for a long while, but the standing was shorter than the standing of the first rak'ah. Then he performed a prolonged bowing which was shorter than that of the first one. He then stood up for a long time, but shorter than the first, then again performed a long bowing, which was shorter than the first, and then prostrated for a shorter while than that of the first prostration. Then he finished the prayer and delivered the sermon, and said what Allah wished, and ordered the people to seek refuge with Allah from the punishment of the grave. Volume 2, Book 18, number 165, narrated by Abu Masud, Allah's apostle, said, "The sun and the moon do not eclipse because of someone's death or life, but they are two signs amongst the signs of Allah, so pray whenever you see them." Volume 2, Book 18, number 166, narrated by Aisha. In the lifetime of the Prophet, the sun eclipsed, and the Prophet, p.b.u.h, stood up to offer the prayer with the people and recited a long recitation. Then he performed a prolonged bowing and then lifted his head and recited a prolonged recitation which was shorter than the first. Then he performed a prolonged bowing which was shorter than the first, and then lifted his head and performed 2 prostrations. He then stood up for the second rak'ah and offered it like the first. Then he stood up and said, "The sun and the moon do not eclipse because of someone's life or death, but they are 2 signs amongst the signs of Allah, which he shows to his worshippers. So whenever you see them, make haste for the prayer." Volume 2, Book 18, number 167, narrated by Abu Musa. The sun eclipsed, and the Prophet got up, being afraid that it might be the hour, that is, Day of Judgment. He went to the mosque and offered the prayer with the longest qiyam, bowing and prostration that I had ever seen him doing. Then he said, "These signs which Allah sends do not occur because of the life or death of somebody, but Allah makes his worshippers afraid by them. So when you see anything thereof, proceed to remember Allah, invoke him, and ask for his forgiveness." Volume 2, Book 18, number 168, narrated by Al-Mughira bin Shuba. On the day of Ibrahim's death, the sun eclipsed, and the people said that the eclipse was due to the death of Ibrahim, the son of the Prophet. Allah's apostle said, "The sun and the moon are 2 signs amongst the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse because of someone's death or life. So when you see them, invoke Allah and pray till the eclipse is clear." Volume 2, Book 18, number 169, narrated by Abu Bakr. In the lifetime of the Prophet, the sun eclipsed, and then he offered a 2 rakat prayer. Volume 2, Book 18, number 170, narrated by Abu Bakr. In the lifetime of the Allah's Apostle, p.b.u.h, the sun eclipsed, and he went out dragging his clothes till he reached the mosque. The people gathered around him, and he led them and offered 2 rakat. When the sun eclipse cleared, he said, "The sun and the moon are 2 signs amongst the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse because of the death of someone, and so when an eclipse occurs, pray and invoke Allah till the eclipse is over." It happened that a son of the Prophet called Ibrahim died on that day, and the people were talking about that, saying that the eclipse was caused by his death. Volume 2, Book 18, number 171, narrated by Aisha. The Prophet led us and performed 4 bowing in 2 rakat during the solar eclipse, and the first rakah was longer. Volume 2, Book 18, number 172, narrated by Aisha. The Prophet, p.b.u.h, recited the Quran aloud during the eclipse prayer, and when he had finished the eclipse prayer, he said the takbir and bowed. When he stood straight from bowing, he would say, "Sami Allahu liman hamida Rabbana walaka alhamd," and he would again start reciting. In the eclipse prayer, there are 4 bowing and 4 prostrations in 2 rakat. Al-Awza'i and others said that they had heard Az-Zuhri from Ursa, from Aisha, saying, "In the lifetime of Allah's Apostle, the sun eclipsed, and he made a person to announce prayer in congregation. He led the prayer and performed 4 bowing and 4 prostrations in 2 rakat." Narrated Al-Walid that Abdur Rahman bin Namir had informed him that he had heard the same. Ibn Shihab heard the same. Az-Zurul said, "I asked Ursa, 'What did your brother Abdullah bin Azuba do?' He prayed 2 rakat of the eclipse prayer like the morning prayer when he offered the eclipse prayer in Median." Ursa replied that he had missed, that is, did not pray according to, the Prophet's tradition. Sulaiman bin Kathir and Sufyan bin Hussein narrated from Az-Zuhri that the prayer for the eclipse used to be offered with loud recitation.